Piles of rubbish on residential streets, rats as big as cats, and fears of a public health emergency. England's second largest city, Birmingham, is making global headlines as a long-running strike by the bin workers remains unresolved. So, how did it get so bad? And when will the city finally get cleaned up? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, thousands of tons of rubbish are littering the streets of England's second city, Birmingham, as no bin collections have taken place for around 6 weeks. Refuse workers are striking over pay and conditions and have rejected the latest offer from the City Council that was proposed just this week. How much longer will residents have to live amongst the rubbish?
Dirty nappies and rotting food waste have taken over the streets of Birmingham. A fierce and dirty dispute between refuse workers and Birmingham City Council has left the city's 1.2 million residents living amongst littered streets and smelly black bin bags. The strike has no end in sight.
These scenes are becoming all too common around the streets of Birmingham, with piles of rubbish so high the military have been called in to help deal with the crisis. It doesn't look particularly nice, but it smells even worse. Many are saying a public health emergency needs to be declared as rats the size of cats have been seen roaming the streets and now getting into people's homes. So is it time for the government to step in and help find a solution?
Residents have largely been in support of the strike action, but patience is running thin.
The rubbish itself is causing chaos. I mean, it's come to a point where, some of the streets you can't even walk down because the smell is getting quite bad. So the government needs to step up a bit so they can sort this mess out.
Government needs to step in, definitely, because at the end of the day we're paying council tax, all of us are, and we deserve to be treated better.
While the standoff continues, people have started to take action themselves to clean up the streets.
I believe we as Muslims need to take responsibility for not fly tipping. We need to book the tips, take our own private rubbish to the tips and take responsibility and clean the roads as well.
This is Birmingham's third bin strike in 10 years, and the council effectively declared itself bankrupt 3 years ago. Birmingham City Council told Roundtable it was incredibly disappointing a second offer to resolve the dispute was rejected, but their doors remain open. With the issue gaining global attention, does the government need to take drastic action to salvage the image of Britain and stop this from becoming a national crisis?
Well, let's meet our guests. Our very own Roundtable reporter, Nishaat Ismail, who you just heard from, joins us now in the studio. Joining us from Birmingham, we have Stephen McCabe. He is Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Programmes. That's at DoctorateHub. And in Lancaster, in England, we have Professor Mohammed Munir. He's a virologist at Lancaster University. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Nisha, I nearly said rat table. You've just come back from Birmingham. How was it?
Well, look, I'll set the scene for you. When we first got to Birmingham, we got off at Birmingham New Street near the city centre. It's actually quite difficult to tell what's happening. You look around, looks relatively normal, but as you get inside Birmingham, really inside the areas where a lot of communities are living, that's when it hits you. The smell hits you, the litter hits you, the rubbish hits you. And not going to sugarcoat it, it's pretty grim. Just upon walking around, you can see the streets are littered everywhere. It's something that I've not seen in all my time of going around, the cities in the UK, whilst, working on this programme. It was shocking, actually, to see. People are angry. They're quite fed up. We spoke to quite a few residents who didn't want to be on camera, but they were saying, we can't even open our window. We're getting the smell inside. And as the weather's getting warmer, people are worried that the stench is going to get even worse. There was one lady who said, my kids usually play out here in this back area where, some cars are, but they've got nowhere to play now because it's covered with bin bags and rubbish. And she goes, it's unsafe. And now we've heard this infamous line, we've seen it on headlines, we've seen people in Birmingham saying it rats the size of cats. We actually did see 2 dead rats on the street. And it's a really grim sight.
Thanks, Nish. Excellent scene setter for us there. Professor Mohammed, given everything you've read over the last 5 weeks and what we just heard from Nish, how concerned are you about health in Birmingham now?
Yeah, well, mainly almost all of the rodents, they are a big reservoir for viruses, for bacteria, for worms and parasites. And particularly speaking onto the rats, they are harboring more than 50 different viruses and bacteria and other pathogens that can transmit to the human and have severe consequences. And only specifically speaking in the UK, we have 13 different zoonotic infections. These are those infections that come from animal to the human, and 10 non-zoonotic infections. Those are already into the human. They are passed through the rats, and the rats, they are the one that breed very well. I mean, for example, pair of one rat can give up to 1,000 pups in a season of a year, and they reproduce very well, and especially at the time when they have a plenty of food, and at the time when they have a very high breeding opportunities at this situation. So, given all this scenario, rodents, especially rats, they are harboring many of those pathogens that could be dangerous for people living in a vicinity, getting in direct contact, and they can catch those infections.
Stephen, to you, Birmingham City Council went bankrupt last year. I mean, give me your impression of the economics of this. 17 bin men, that's what we're told. 17 bin men are affected by these proposed changes to working conditions. They're holding a city of 1.2 million people to ransom.
Just to sort of clarify, it wasn't last year, but the year before, when the council declared sort of themselves effectively bankrupt and had the commissioners in looking at the finances, and there's been a lot of sort of a financial adjustment, which the people of Birmingham sort of are feeling the impact of. And indeed, but still having to sort of pay 7.5% increase in council tax this year and 10% last year. So it's a big hike. I also, just to say, this is not the sort of the first bin strike that sort of the residents have experienced in recent years. There was one actually in 2017, and there is a sort of a view that the sort of the roots of this particular dispute are sort of be found in the sort of the somewhat cack-handed solution to that, which actually sort of that dragged on across the summer. And I can, Nish talked about the sort of smell. I remember there's a sort of butcher's around the corner. Boy, oh boy, you could smell the meat from sort of about 100 feet away. The sort of they leave out their sort of their the offcuts, and when that goes off in the summer, you really know about it. So yeah, Birmingham has got a big problem. Also, you should mention, of course, you're sort of reading from the sort of the script of the council. They're talking about 17 workers are affected. Unite, which are the union who are behind the sort of the refuse disposal sort of strike at present, or the industrial action, they're talking about 150 workers, and what they claim is that, sort of these are the sort of the waste recycling collection officers, which are at the back of the bin wagon, who do a number of things, but most primarily is to sort of to make sure that everything is done safely, which is obviously very important. And what Birmingham want to do is to sort of to get rid of this role, and the Unite claim that sort of 150 workers are going to lose something like £8,000 a year. So we're talking about sort of fairly large stakes for the individuals. So there's a whole sort of argument there. But again, as the whole context of this is an authority which has had to sort of pay out £1.1 billion in the last number of years, as a consequence of an equal pay act, not sort of paying the right pay for sort of workers, or particularly sort of female workers, and indeed that there is still sort of something like sort of $750 million that they I believe to have to pay out. And the real clincher, and perhaps this is where the sort of the problem is, that Birmingham City Council claim if they sort of allow this to continue and effectively sort of just give up, as it were, then they'll have further equal pay claims or equal pay claims against them, which will make their financial situation even more dire than it already is. And I think I've sort of painted a picture which suggests that sort of Birmingham is a sort of a city that could do with sort of more money, not less.
Steve, you're living in Birmingham. Just tell me how you feel then as a resident and as a council taxpayer, seeing your city make headlines all over the world. I mean, a German newspaper the other week had a headline, "Rats as big as cats." The PR on this is extremely damaging for Birmingham.
Right, I'm going to sort of, to spoiler alert, I have not seen a rat, so I have to say I'm not been looking for them, so maybe there's an issue there and I'm sort of very lucky, so maybe I need to get out a bit more. No, I mean, also remember, if people can sort of cast their minds back to the summer of 2022, we had the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. That was a really great success. The sun shone and people sort of came to Birmingham, and it was in a sort of really great light. The year after, we had the sort of effectively the declaration of sort of bankruptcy. So Birmingham is in the sort of the headlines for the sort of the wrong reason, and there is no doubt about it that you go into the city centre and you don't sort of see any particular evidence of the sort of the strike, but you've then only got to sort of go probably about half a mile out of the city centre into sort of inner city areas where, of course, the sort of the population density is much greater, and of course these are the headlines that sort of the reporters, you know, I know the way this works, they love. I've seen the sort of the bags of rubbish piling up, and there's no doubt about it. You know, it's pretty dreadful for some residents, and of course we sort of heard the virology issues that come from rats, and of course, you know, rats are sort of in the psyche of sort of everyone that you know they carry the plague, and that was absolutely devastating many hundreds of years ago. But nonetheless, you know, there's a big problem. So I think residents are sort of becoming a bit cheesed off. They want to see a solution. I think there is a sort of degree of sympathy for sort of refuse disposal operators, because quite clearly it's not a job that sort of most people want to do. So I have every sort of respect for them. But hey, you know, I'm like everyone else, finding that my rubbish is piling up, and you know, there's no way to get rid of it unless you sort of drive to the sort of the tip, and of course that takes a sort of time and effort, and of course you have to carry the smelly bags in your car.
Nish, for our international audience, they may not be aware, but in the UK, you pay your income tax on your earnings. There's also a council tax every month that you pay for local services, top of which is your bin collection. A lot of people in Birmingham will be paying a lot of money for council tax, and the service they're getting is non-existent.
Well, just to add on what Steve has said, and I'll come back to your question about the optics and the PR of it, people were incredibly upset over the fact that there are cameras all over their city getting images of this. Birmingham has, and Steve can, of course, you know, add to this as well, it's a city of proud people, it's a diverse place with diverse communities living there, and they were angry, saying this is not what we want Birmingham to be known for. You know, and generally people in Birmingham have been behind the strike action. They want their workers to be paid fairly, but they're saying, you know, this is something that we can't contain anymore, and we do such great things. It's the second city of the UK, that's what it's known for, and this is not what we want to become the face of. So something needs to be done immediately. Coming back to your question, this is a sentiment that we heard across people in Birmingham. You know, they're saying we're paying council tax, cost of living is going up, the council tax is going up as well. But a common theme that we heard was that because of years of austerity and cuts to local services, people are having to pay the price for it, and they're simply fed up. So they want central government to take action. They're saying this is no longer something that we can contain. We've seen, as you saw in the report, there have been community leaders and groups up and down the city that have taken it into their own hands to try and clean up the streets. But they're saying this shouldn't be our responsibility. We need leaders to step up.
Mohammed, as we head towards summer now in Europe, what are your concerns if this lingers on? 20,000 tonnes of rubbish on the streets, temperatures will be climbing week on week. What are your concerns about the health hazards?
Oh, absolutely. It will increase significantly because the rats, they are entering into the peak reproductive period where they have plenty of food. They will reproduce very quickly and very well. And more the rats, higher the chances for these infections to go from one place to another. And that is the time actually when people come out with their pets and they walk around. And if those are hunting these rats, they are the ones that are going to spread the infection, both mechanically, by that I mean if cat or dog will hunt the rat, the infection that those rats are carrying will pass on to those pets, and when they go back home, they can transmit to other people. So similarly, as the weather gets better and better, more people come out, they will have more chances to interact with these rats, and therefore the chances for these infections to spread will increase.
And Mohammed, can I just ask, people in Birmingham who are watching, they'll be wondering, how can they avoid getting sick? How can they avoid going near these tips of all the refuse? What advice would you give people?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing we know that in the field of microbiology, that it is very difficult to eradicate any infection which enters and establishes itself in rodents, because it's very difficult to capture them all and to cull them all. But what you can do is to avoid your direct contact with the rats, and keeping personal hygiene. If you get in contact with them accidentally or so, wash your hands, keep your pets away from the rats, and that is all what you can do as an individual level. But the basic fundamental issue is really to remove any source of food or any source of harboring these rats in the community, because that is really where the infection will spread.
Steve, looking at solutions here, on the money side of things, what can a council do when it's gone bankrupt? I mean, is there any cash to sort this out?
No, in the city council that they're looking to save money, so I can see the sort of the attraction. Although, of course, what we're talking is, if you multiply 150 by 8,000, I think it comes up sort of just over £1 million, which, of course, for individuals is a lot of money. But in the sort of the context of, dare I say it, the sort of the largest authority in Western Europe, it's small change. But nonetheless, this is a council that, of course, is being assailed in every which way. And of course, as we sort of have heard, and I can attest that sort of we're all paying more, and we're getting sort of fewer services. And indeed, the city council, when I sort of they sent me my reminder, or at least the sort of telling me how much extra I was paying this year, they put in a note about sort of decreasing sort of refuse. We were used to, before the sort of the dispute, having our sort of refuse collected. This is the general refuse, by the way, once a week, and that was going to go to once every 2 weeks. And indeed, recycling is going to have to be sort of broken up into other sort of forms, such as glass and paper and whatever else, which of course is entirely sensible. But the problem is, of course, that sort of people are sort of losing faith in sort of the ability of the council to do the things that they're supposed to do. And indeed, of course, as Nish also indicated, when you talk to people, particularly those who are sort of poorest and most vulnerable, they're finding their services are being cut, which of course is ever more devastating. So it's really difficult to sort of know where the sort of the solution is going to sort of come here. I mean, there will eventually be a solution. I know some are sort of saying that sort of, that there's a political optic to this, that this is being caused by Labour. I think Labour are very desperate to sort of to get this, because of course Unite are one of the sort of the unions that are sort of supposed to support Labour. So it doesn't look good for them. And it's really difficult. And indeed, many sort of people have claimed over a long period of time that because Birmingham is such a big authority, that maybe sort of you need to split it up so that there might be solutions. And indeed, I sort of hear that sort of one way, of course, is to sort of to get not do refuge collection, and indeed to sort of to privatise it. But I don't want to see that. So the hope, and of course it's very difficult to see because of course there was a sort of ballot that was roundly rejected by the sort of those who sort of took part in the vote, that they didn't want the sort of solution that's on offer, and indeed more particularly that the sort of, and worryingly, there is talk in the sort of national press of the similar disputes breaking out across the country, again from sort of cash-strapped councils. So it's really difficult. I mean, and the weather is getting warmer, so the problem will sort of exacerbate, and no solution, certainly this side of Easter, and maybe sort of not for many weeks.
Thanks, Steve. Nish, the newspapers are speculating about soldiers on the ground, boots on the ground, troops being brought in. Is that something people of Birmingham mentioned to you?
Yes, they did. I mean, everyone, as we were walking around as the day progressed, once the deal was rejected by the union, people were asking, well, what's going to happen? Do you know? People looking to us for answers. So it was quite difficult because we, of course, don't have all the answers. But, some people were aware, and we heard, across newspapers that the military will be sent in to help organise efforts to try and deal with it. But again, where is the rubbish going? We're not really any closer to that solution as of yet. So I think the anxiety is running really, really high. And as the weather, again, as everyone's mentioning, the weather's getting warmer, everyone's just thinking, how are we going to deal with this issue? And I think Steve touched upon the issue of the city centre, being cleaner. So you can't really notice the problem there. And I think the perception is those who are in densely populated areas are being left to deal with this crisis on their own. We met people who are not from Birmingham, from other cities, who were there for shopping, and they were in areas that were heavily populated by ethnic minorities, and they were saying, is this something to do with, social class? Are we seeing a divide along economic lines as well? So it doesn't look great. It's making people feel quite alienated. So it's a major concern.
Mohammed, what would you like to see happen now? Is it a matter of bringing the military in and just blitzing everywhere, getting this rubbish out, or is there a more nuanced approach?
Well, if we look on to the situation from the health lens, certainly it's a public health emergency at a national level, and something genuinely and seriously needed to be done to clear off this one, and also to ensure that it doesn't happen again, because each time these kind of events happen, the risk to the public will carry on increasing. And it's not just that, okay, if you remove the trash, then certainly the risk is de-risked. It's not really that, because the rodents keep coming to the same place where they keep finding the food, and if they don't find, they're going to come again and again. So the situation will linger even if all the bins are removed. And also needed to ensure that these doesn't happen again. Each time this kind of event happen, the risk for new infection to come into the animal and those animals to spill over to the human will carry on increasing.
Mohammed, can I just ask, have you any concerns about what Nish just raised there, that some areas are economically deprived, they seem to have an awful lot more refuse on their streets, and there are very wealthy suburbs like Edgbaston in Birmingham, where I'm told there's no rubbish anywhere?
Yeah, well, I think they could possibly be associated with the financial status and overall the awareness within the community. But more looking onto the health perspective, it is actually the same health risks for anybody who is in a better area or in a worse area. All what we needed to ensure is at the community, at the national, and hopefully at certain forum, that these kind of sources for the food for these rodents are not piling up. Because I can see from the images, I haven't been to Birmingham myself, but I can see these heaps of piles are really great source for these rodents to flourish.
Steve, talk to me about where the leadership is on this, because I've read that one of the council leaders in Birmingham managed to head off to the south of France in the first week of this crisis. A local MP, Steve, headed off to Japan on an all-expenses trip in the middle of the biggest crisis to hit Birmingham in years. I mean, do the leaders actually care about the people?
Well, I'm sure they do, and they certainly care when it comes to election time. And I'm sure that the Labour Party in Birmingham must be very glad that there are no local elections in the city in May, because I think they'd sort of get something of a kicking, as the expression goes, from the local residents. I mean, it's really difficult because Angela Rayner was in Birmingham last week, and of course she is sponsored by Unite, so of course she had a vested interest and pleaded with them to sort of to find a way to sort of ending this dispute, because of course it looks bad from Birmingham. And indeed, if I may sort of actually alert your sort of your viewers to the fact that there was a very long dispute in sort of 1978-79, the so-called Winter of Discontent, and of course that was public sector workers in general, but most manifestly sort of demonstrated by the sort of the piles of black bin bags once again. And of course, what happened after that? Well, there was an election in 1979, and a certain Margaret Thatcher came in with the sort of proviso to sort of to reform local services and privatise and whatever else. So I think the sort of the Labour Party and Keir Starmer in particular must be sort of really embarrassed by this, because of course he came to power only last summer, of course, it's not that many months ago, proclaiming things are going to get better. I think the people of Birmingham feel that they're getting an awful lot worse, and indeed, as we've sort of picked up and Nish was talking about a couple of moments ago, people in the most deprived communities, they're asking themselves, well, it's not getting better for us, it's getting a whole lot worse. So people want solutions, and indeed you mentioned about bringing the army in. I think that's not a sort of long-term solution, that there's got to be a better way. And we're in the year 2025, and this is one of the great cities of sort of Britain, and it can't manage to sort of get its refuge moved, or it's not moving quickly enough for a sort of a civilized city. So solutions must be there, and I think what probably is needed, and you're absolutely right, is the sort of the political will to sort of to come in, if you like, and sort of bring in ACAS, which of course is the sort of the arbitration service, do something really sort of radical. This is a sort of a major crisis, and people have got to regard it as such.
Professor Mohammed, how long do you give it until we start seeing outbreaks of Weil's disease, various different viruses that are carried by rats? Are you really worried now as we head towards summer?
Absolutely, because what happened is that in a matter of fortnight, the viruses would establish themselves, the pathogens would start establishing themselves into the first progeny of the rodents, especially the rats. When they start reproducing, the number increase, and that is the risk that it carry on expanding quite lavishly. If this matter is not sorted, I feel no doubt that some sort of bacteria, virus, parasite, ticks, fleas, mites that are harboring even on the outside of the rodents could spill over to the human and cause a serious concern.
Nish, final point to you. I'm guessing you won't be wanting to rush back to Birmingham to cover rats anytime soon, but this needs to be sorted out, doesn't it? I mean, this is 1.2 million people living in appalling conditions because of failure of all leadership.
I mean, absolutely, and I think just to highlight the fact that it's the society's most vulnerable that suffer the most. One of the shop owners that we spoke to yesterday said he doesn't have the heart to tell elderly people who are coming and tipping their rubbish on the side of his shop, saying, don't do it. He goes, I understand they're desperate, they've got nowhere to put their rubbish. You've got mothers with children who aren't able to go to the tip and get rid of their waste, so they're coming and leaving their rubbish here. So it's affecting the most vulnerable and most marginalised in the community, and people just really want to see some sort of action. You have seen loads of community groups that are trying to take it into their own hands, but they're no longer able to contain the situation. And I think people want to see more money being put into local government, not seeing cuts happen to services, because again, this is what we're seeing. You mentioned that, the plan is to reduce the amount of times the waste is collected. That's only going to see more rubbish across the streets. You're going to see smellier neighbourhoods, and that's not what people want. People want to see more money being pumped into the local authorities.
Nish, thank you. On that note, thank you, Mohammed, as well, and Stephen in Birmingham. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.